Hello and welcome to Nzone Tonight and the second of our election debates. Tonight's topic is law and order, and we're speaking to political representatives from National, Labour and the Kiwi Party. Community leaders we've spoken to say they're most concerned about young people getting caught up in a life of crime. They say there needs to be more support for parents and community youth programs. So let's see what our politicians have to say. Welcome to Phil Twyford Labour, Larry Baldock the Kiwi Party and Chester Burrows National. We'll be talking about law and order today, and at the end of the session each of you will have the opportunity to sum up your policies. First question to you, Phil Twyford. What are Labour's priorities for law and order?
And Labour's priorities are to continue to be tough on criminals and tough on crime. We've delivered big increases in getting tough on sentencing, parole and bail. That's put more hardened violent criminals away over the last 9 years. But the thing about Labour is that we're also tough on the causes of crime. So we believe in building a justice system that's more modern and effective and creative. We've got to reduce reoffending. We've had big success in doing that, and we're rolling out a raft of schemes to rehabilitate criminals in prison. And also early intervention. We've got to be much smarter as a country at tackling the real causes of crime, both in the community, as early as when kids are in their first few years of life, but also right through to dealing with some of the causes of crime when people are actually in prison.
Chester Burrows National.
Well, I think there's a mixture of three approaches. There's punitive and restorative and also preventative. So there is policy around parole conditions, taking away parole for the worst repetitive violent offenders, also preventative in youth initiatives and preventing young people getting into crime to start with, and then restorative around those policies are going to address the needs of victims.
Larry Baldock, the Kiwi Party's priorities for law and order.
Well, of course, we should get tough on serious violent criminals, and we believe there should be no parole for them, minimum of 20 years. But really, the problem in New Zealand is that crime pays. People are committing property crime, and they're basically getting away with it. They're making money out of it. We think we need to restore the whole principle of restitution, that if you damage someone's goods, you steal somebody's goods, you're going to pay that back for as long as it takes. And our courts right now are simply sending people to prison where we feed them for 3 meals a day. They come out after 6 months or a year and they think they've paid their debt to society. But the poor old victim is still losing their property. Insurance companies maybe are compensating, but we're all paying higher premiums for it. So we must re-establish the principle that you will pay for the damage you do in this society, and we'll have you out there working, if necessary, with a bracelet around your ankle, with automatic deductions out of your salary until you've made restitution for what you've done. That should happen with young offenders and young people as early as possible, so they learn that there is no way of getting off from the consequences of their actions.
Crime pays, Phil Twyford. There's been a lot of criticism of the government's handling of policing issues, including the confidence of law-abiding citizens that they are being adequately protected. What's your reaction to that criticism?
Well, and we've invested like no government before in increasing police on the beat. We've put 2,500 new police officers on staff in the last 9 years. There's another 1,000 in this current term as part of our agreement with New Zealand First. The police are out there, and I think that you can see that in the reduction in crime. Crime overall in the last 9 years is down 11%. That's a stunning achievement. Compare that to when National was last in power in the 90s, when crime was up, not down. And violent crime, which we're all concerned about, increased more under National in the 90s than it has under Labour in the last 9 years. So
there's still a lot of concerns though, Phil Twyford, aren't there? Response time to the emergency 111 call system, issues of police integrity. Are we getting it right, Chester Burrows? How would National address some of these issues? Well,
there's a heck of a lot to do, and in actual fact, when you talk about violent crime having gone up 52% in the last 9 years, that's huge. And it's the legacy of this government. So we need to be able to address that, and it's not going to be easy. We're also seeing, for instance, in South Auckland, there's been a huge lack of frontline responders, primary responders. So yes, there are staff, there are people doing important jobs in the back room, but the opportunity for police to turn up, take complaints, is down, and there's a huge deficit in accommodation. So the Otara police station at the moment has got 3 portable accommodations sitting on the back lawn trying to house the police, and it's in a critical stage. But the point that Larry made is that crime pays, and we have to reverse that. So National has supported legislation which deals to the proceeds of crime, shifting the onus of proof of legitimacy of purchases back onto criminals. Labor should have had that through, ticked off and done before the election, but it pushed through the things like the Electoral Finance Act for their own purposes, and actually victims of crime in New Zealand are paying the price for that lethargy.
Larry Baldock, community leaders are telling us that more needs to be done to address the so-called criminal nurseries. They want more strength at the top of the cliff, not just the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. What is the Kiwi Party going to do to help identify families at risk?
Yeah, well, we believe we're losing our values in society, and one of those values is the importance of marriage in our families. We want to see pre-marriage education, marriage enrichment courses, so that we start to rebuild two-parent families in this country, because that is really what's breaking down. If you listen to Judge Andrew Beecroft, he'll say that only 12% of those young people that come before his court are coming from homes where both parents are living. 28% coming from solo parent families, and a whole whopping 60% from families where their parents aren't even there. So we've got to address those breeding grounds of crime. That means we need to have role models in the community, but I think these people are often in the hands of Child, Youth and Family, and they're doing an appalling job. We've fostered young children, and they get bounced from foster home to foster home. It's going to cost us a lot, but we have to do something about giving those young people a better upbringing than simply being bounced around like they're second-hand goods. They've got to be placed in homes with some permanency, and really giving the foster parents the responsibility of treating them like their own children. That's why this anti-smacking law was so devastating, not only for foster parents but for parents in general. All children need to have boundaries if we're going to keep them out of criminal behaviour, and we've just taken away authority from parents in that stupid law, and it's going to pay awful consequences, awful dividends into society in the years to come.
In fact, the principal youth court judge, Andrew Beecroft, said that he's seeing the same young offenders coming before his courts over and over again, and he describes the virtual disappearance of community sentences with activities as a tragedy. What's Labor doing to address that?
Well, there are a whole raft of programs, Anne, that are about tackling early intervention for young offenders. What Labor doesn't believe is effective is the kind of boot camp, simplistic kind of solution that National Party is promoting, where, you know, we had corrective training for a decade in New Zealand, where young first offenders were sent out to a regime of cold showers and early morning runs. It was a spectacular failure over a decade, and all it produced was fit young criminals. We need to do more than that.
I think Judge Beecroft is talking about the present, not the past. He's saying we need more local programs to help this community sentencing with supervised activities. Labor, we've spoken to you, we've heard your viewpoint. Can I hand that over to you now, please,
well,
Chester?
It's important to make a very clear point here. John Key, on announcing the Fresh Start programs that we had, was specific to say it was not a boot camp. Judge Andrew Beecroft actually supports our policy in relation to that, and there's public record of that. So to run it off and line it up with what was corrective training, as Phil was said, is absolutely wrong. Now, Labor has walked away from a lot of these local initiatives, and I've got one in my area called Start Taranaki. It went into recess in May, and it wasn't until Campbell Live did an item on it specifically and put the minister on TV, where she came out and said, well, we will call this an essential service and we will make it happen, after she was put pressure. I had a letter from her office basically saying, look, they've had all their money they're going to get and there's no more. National says that the drivers of real change in behaviour for not only youth at risk, but also high-end young offenders are these local programs that are hugely successful. We've got to back them, and National does.